not be consumed and burdened by the stresses and challenges of this world. And that's easier said than done, because we all carry the weight of past trauma, emotions, the world. Just we all carry a lot of weight, and our students especially.
I'm really pumped for this conversation because I think one of the biggest things that I've witnessed and really came to realize in my own personal journey is how important it is for me to live the standard for my own kids and, for the kids in the community and whatever else. Because the quote that's been on my mind lately is, you can teach what you know, but you'll reproduce what you show.
Yeah.
Right. So it's really not about just, hey, I'm telling you to follow these rules or do this thing, but it's really kind of how you live your life is really what the people around you are going to reproduce.
Right.
And the work that you're doing, especially in schools, I think is so critically important to kind of raise that tide for the next generation. So before we get any further, I just want to honor you for the work that you are doing.
Thank you. Yeah, I love it.
Because it means a lot to me personally, just to have the knowledge that there is someone out there who's dedicating their time and energy, literally, to helping that next generation. So huge honor to you. If we could, I'd love for you to share a little bit about specifically what it is that you are doing, just so we can kind of get everyone up to speed, and then we'll really dive in.
I got it. Sounds good to me. Thank you.
Let's do it. Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Whenever you're ready, man. Take it.
We're good. We're good. Just jump right in.
We're good.
Okay.
Yeah, jump right in.
All right. So I'm essentially, I speak to schools and teachers and administrators all over the country, all over the world, through my partnership with best-selling author John Gordon. And maybe your listeners yourself have heard of John. He's had 31 books come out. 18 of them are bestsellers, and him and I met when I was 20 years old, right? So we've spent almost two decades together, trying to positively impact people everywhere we go. And he knew I wanted to be a speaker since a young age, because I always knew, not only I love public speaking, but I love the power it can have, the positive power of really helping people shift their mindset, right? So when I go in and I talk to students, faculty, admins, it doesn't matter. I'm telling pinpointed stories for them. I'm getting them to think about their own life. I'm getting them to think about what their future is going to be like. I want them to engage in a more positive mindset and lifestyle, not be consumed and burdened by the stresses and challenges of this world. And that's easier said than done, because we all carry the weight of past trauma, emotions, the world. Just we all carry a lot of weight, and our students especially carry a huge burden of that, because they're exposed to more stimuli and information than ever, right? And comparison, and like when we were in school, you were compared to who was left or right of you in the class. Right now, they have the whole world and social media open to them, so it just opens up a lot of new stressors. And to be honest with you, I can prove that, because when I was just speaking to every high school student in a county near me in Florida. I'm from Florida. And last month, and I had like 8 different groups in front of me, and I asked the groups the same question at the end. Okay. I said, actually at the beginning, we were playing a game. Would you rather? What would you want to do? And I said, how many of you would rather live in right now, 2025, or go all the way back to the year I was born, 1985, and live in that 85, so 85 or 2025? I thought it was going to be overwhelmingly right now because of technology and everything. Every group are very different, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, different schools. I would say 75% of the hands went up for 1985. And maybe that's just the simplicity of what they feel like 40 years ago would have been like. But I thought that was a real awakening moment for me to be like, I got to work with them on mindset. So that's what I do. I'm a speaker. I'm an author. I'm a podcaster. I work with John Gordon, and I love the power of public speaking and communication to help build school culture, empower students, energize teachers, and make our schools and hopefully this world, right, a better place. That's what I can only hope and strive for.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you mentioned too about working with the teachers too, because I think it's such a critical part of really building the right mindset, not just for the kids, but if we can help solve some of the mindset um, issues or concerns of the teachers and the educators as well, because there's a lot of pressure that gets put on them and not as much support as I think that they really truly deserve, right? So if we are supporting the administration a little bit better, that will then trickle down to the kids. Do you see it that same way?
Oh, for sure. A school is only going to be as successful as the leadership taking them in the direction they're supposed to go. Because I've worked with several schools where they've had, 5 principals in 7 years. And what do you think is going to happen to that culture, right? They have no identity, they have no vision, and you've lost the trust of the faculty because they're like, well, you're just going to leave me in a year or 2 years and go somewhere else. So it can't be understated or overstated just how important a school principal, an administrator, a school team is, because I've seen the schools that are ultra successful, and usually I can pinpoint it right to a leader who they respect and love. And why on earth, if you're a teacher or a staff member, would you go anywhere else, make a lateral move somewhere else in the district or elsewhere if you really love that principle? Now, of course, people get promotions all the time, and I'm all for that, but I'm not a big fan of lateral moves just to make them, because usually the grass isn't greener somewhere else. So a great principal is going to drive their staff towards excellence. They're going to have a nice balance of love and accountability, expectation and relationship. They're going to have a nice balance of that, and people are going to want to stay. And guess what? When they stay, they see themselves as part of the greater success of that school. So they're going to want to engage more. They're going to want to be club leaders, sit on committees, sit on school improvement, like share ideas on things that they can do differently. Look at, go beyond the textbook. I'm a beyond the textbook kind of guy. I'm a huge project-based learning kind of guy. They're going to look into those areas and say, well, how else can we accent the things we need to do to hit our standards? What else can we do? They're not going to be a check the box type people. And that starts really with school leaders driving that, which is why, leadership positions, especially in schools, it's not meant for everybody, right? It's not meant for everybody. It's meant for that specific person who is ready for that role and is ambitious enough to accept that role.
Yeah. So let's take a step backwards, if we could, to very specifically talk about what is the energy bus, right? Because if we're focused on the energy bus for schools, let's define what is the energy bus for someone who's not familiar with it, maybe hasn't read the book, hasn't heard about it before. What is the energy bus as a whole, and then what is the school variant of it?
So essentially, the energy bus, and it was a book that came out in 2007 by John Gordon, and I helped launch the book. I was his intern at the time, and I helped him launch this book 18 years ago. The book itself follows a main character's journey towards becoming more positive and overcoming negativity. It's a story. It's a fable. It's not a self-help, case study book. It's an actual fable that has the principles of how you can better your life wrapped into it. 10 rules, right, that this character learns throughout his time getting on the bus every morning to go to work, because he gets a flat tire, so he's got to take the bus. And this bus driver becomes this mentor figure for him, and along with the other passengers on the bus, gives him one rule every bus ride, and he thinks about it, uses it in his life to change his life and his work and save his family, right? So it's a story about a character, overcoming challenges to be more positive. So that's the quick Reader's Digest version of that book that has now gone on to sell 4 million copies around the world. So it's a massive book. But we had so many schools pick up the book, because if you know anything about schools, they love a book study, all right? And they want a book study that's relevant to their staff. So we had so many schools between 2008 and 2016 or so reading the book. But they would reach out and say, okay, we read it. What else? Like, what else can we do with this? We want more of this. So we developed a school program based on that best-selling book. And in the meantime, John had written a kids book as well, a kids book on the energy bus. So essentially, we took some of the principles, the rules from the original Energy Bus book, and we streamlined them into 5. And we created this program that helps schools use the Energy Bus rules on their campus. They focus on one at a time, create a positive vision, fuel your ride with positive energy, no bullying allowed, love your passengers, enjoy the ride. So those are the 5 rules. And they have weekly classroom activities they do to reinforce each rule. There's staff resources. There's monthly coaching that I do. I have a call today with all my principals. So we help schools create conversations around their school culture, allowing them to look introspectively and also work with their staff and students on learning these Energy Bus rules so they can be thinking about them and use them in their personal life. So, we have posters that go up on the walls and there's challenges. And so it's all about, if you want to defeat negativity and create a positive school culture, you join the Energy Bus for Schools program based on this mega best-selling book that I helped launch, right? So that's the program. Then you have the original book, and then John and I wrote the sequel to the original book called The Energy Bus for Schools, same name, that basically showed a decade and a half worth of stories on schools that have changed their culture as a result of reading the book or being in the program. So we wanted that book to be, hey, here's what Smith School did. Here's what John School did. Here's what this school did. Here's a blueprint of what other schools did to change their culture. So simply put, right, creating a positive school culture, defeating negativity, and we give you sort of the blueprint, the framework to help do that.
Yeah, I love that. Well, again, I want to honor you for that effort alone, because I think it's so critically important to have that experience for kids. We don't stop to think enough about it. I had this experience the other day with my own kids. I was picking them up from school. We were doing something, and we're leaving the school, and right in front of us in the bus circle, there's a little girl who doesn't want to leave the school to get in her car to go home, lives in a foster house, doesn't really have the best home life. And for my kids, they were asking me, hey, why, like, what's the situation, right? You've got the counselor, the principal, everyone's outside trying to like calm this kid down to get them to be able to go home for the weekend. It's Friday. It's like 4:00. Obviously can't stay there. So just to have the conversation with my kids to be like, hey, unfortunately not everyone has this experience where they get to go home to a house that's as warm and as inviting as yours. For a lot of these kids to be able to have a program like this where they can start to learn some things about their identity, their self-confidence, their experience through life, right? How much do you find that to be a contributing factor for them to have sort of a positive experience where they may not have it at home?
Well, what you said is, I hear that all the time from the principals and superintendents and teachers I talk to when they wanted to find out more about the program. I just had a principal reach out to me yesterday saying their school is 95% considered poverty, right? In the poverty rate, it's free and reduced lunch and those types of things. And I know there's students out there who their home life is not what I grew up with, right? It's not what some of us grew up with, where it was rosy and was perfect. It was nice. And that makes myself and my team even more motivated to create a program that's going to help those students love their school and also feel loved back by their school, because they may go home and we don't know what their home life is like. And I tell teachers this all the time. You can't control their home life, their parents, their guardians, what that looks like there. Like, we may not even have the biggest glimpse into that home world, but you can 100% or close to that control what goes on in your classroom and in your school, and the type of culture and the type of conversations and what you're reinforcing, and the love you're sharing with those students every single day, no days off. And it's remarkable, right? It's remarkable to think about what some of these students are going through. If I have a group that is age appropriate, high school or middle school, I'll do like a lot of small group type assemblies sometimes. I'll put flip chart paper up around the room, and I'll put on there it could say my struggle on it. It could say impossible at the top. And I have them anonymously write something on a sticky note of something that they're dealing with, something that they would view as their struggle or an impossible situation. and they can put a blank sticky note on top. So when they put it up on the flip chart, nobody sees it. Okay. So I want it to be anonymous. And it's unbelievable what some of the things that they have written, right? I mean, more stuff than I've ever dealt with in my life. And these kids are in middle school and high school, and they're dealing with suicidal thoughts. They're dealing with the burden of financial situations, um, you know, boyfriend, girlfriend love that, they're taking way too seriously, but it's wrecking them. But even stuff that's like their self-worth, their value, I'm not good enough. Like I just, it hurt me to see that. Right? And I would bring those papers to their teachers and I say, hang these up in your faculty lounge. And I just want you to see what your students are going through. So it can help to strengthen that empathy gene or bone or whatever you want to call it inside you when you're dealing with them, because sometimes they need a little bit of grace, right? A little bit of understanding and communication to see where they are, what they're going through, because it is a lot. And I am a firm believer that the Energy Buster Schools program, like I said, creates a community on their campus where it's all about love and positivity. They don't ignore negativity. They don't ignore challenges, but they're having conversations and strategies on how they can better deal with that. I think the key word is resilient. I want to create resilient schools with resilient teachers and students, because if you're resilient, right, you have the strategies and skills to not let the world consume you. I think that's powerful.
Yeah, I agree. I think, the word it reminds me of there too is grit.
Yeah.
Right. And I think grit is such a determining factor for actual true success in life, not just monetarily, but hey, how far can you actually achieve things, and the sense of self-worth, right? Because hey, when you get put in a situation that may not be favorable, which unfortunately a lot of these kids and adults are in, that you can rely on yourself because you've got some proven track record of you were able to be there for yourself.
Right.
How important do you think is it in terms of like navigating childhood for these kids to have that sense of self-worth and the self-confidence to be able to maybe resist some social peer pressure or some situations that are less than ideal? Like the importance of self-confidence, and where do we start building that up in kids?
And that's self-worth and self-confidence is kind of the key ingredient. I think the secret ingredient that these students really need to break free from groupthink. Okay. So when I was talking to the group of students last month, and it was a good timing here with this podcast, I said, I just had my 20-year high school reunion. I said, and it was fun. It was amazing. And I had an amazing high school experience, nothing but positive things to say. I had a good group of friends. It was good. It was great. But I said, 20 years later, I really only keep in touch with, I said, two friends. And by keeping in touch, I mean, you're texting every once in a while, like you're what's going on in each other's lives. Okay. And I was telling them that because I wanted them to say, hey, I want you to still have friends and invest in the relationships around you and lean into relationships and have a good time. But I said, I also want you to remember that the people right around you may not be in your life in 5 years, 1 year, 10 years, I said. So I want you to have friends and have a good time, but I want you to think for yourself. And I want you to have that self-worth, like you're talking about, that you get to make your own decisions. You get to be your own person, right? And it doesn't mean you shun people away and shy away from relationships, but you understand that they don't control you, right? And they may not be in your world years down the road. So the person's opinion you think matters so much now, you may not even remember them in 6 years, let alone 20 years, right? And it's getting them to understand. And I remember what it's like in high school. The now is everything, right? That what is going on right now is everything. You're not really thinking that far into the future. So I wanted them to have that balance of still appreciating the now and living in that moment like you do when you're 17, but also being like, all right, I actually have another 80 years, God willing, on this earth. How is this decision going to help? How's it going to impact me in a year or 5 years? I think that's where self-worth comes into play, because you have this confidence in yourself that I love myself, I love who I am, and I'm going to choose to do that or not, right? I'm going to make that choice. I want these kids to know they have a choice in how they spend their time, what they think about, who they spend time with. And
Right.
I had five of them in the front, and I gave them a quote, and I had them all yell the quote out like, Braveheart style. And it was, I will not let anyone walk through my mind with their dirty feet. It's a quote from Gandhi. And I had them like rah-rah it up one at a time because I wanted them to walk away. I knew they weren't going to remember everything that I said in 40 minutes, right? And all the fun stuff we did. But I'm like, if I could give them this one big quote, maybe this will really imprint on them and seed plant in them. Because that quote, I will not let anyone walk through my mind with their dirty feet, encapsulates everything I just said. You have to have your own self-worth, your own self-confidence, and you get to have the choice and decide who impacts you and what you choose to let impact you from this world, from social media. So I thought that was a really pivotal moment.
Yeah, I love that. How do you walk the line between shielding kids, whether they're your own kids or kids in school, from some of the ugliness of life, whether that be uh, vaping, drugs, peer pressure type of items, um, versus dealing with them and kind of showing them things and maybe overexposing it. I'm thinking, to me, I believe it's healthy to not hide things from your kids, whether it's hey, mom and dad had a really stressful day at work because of X, Y, and Z happened. You don't want to use your kid as your own therapist, obviously, but you want to be upfront and say, hey, dad's struggling today because of X, Y, and Z, to show them an example of, hey, it's okay to struggle. We're going to address it. We're going to move on and give them, right, the actual life experience. Where do you draw the line between being real and upfront and honest with your kids versus shielding them from that and letting them just be kids?
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a great question. It really made me think because I have three kids. I have a 10-year-old boy, an 8-year-old boy, and a little 1-year-old girl. So the boys are older and they're fourth and second grade now. And I think we are getting to that point where they're much more in tune because I work at home. I travel a lot, but I'm home when I'm home, and my wife is a stay-at-home mom now, so they're around us, right? They get to be around us a lot, which means they're also seeing the good and the challenges that we're going through. And I think my wife and I make a really good team, and I think that helps. So her and I can kind of discuss beforehand. Hey, let's phrase it this way for them if we're going through something, or if we need to talk about something they witnessed or saw, or saw just heard at school. So I don't we don't when my wife and I don't step on each other's toes. I think we approach it together. Um, but as far as like our relationship or like shielding them, I think we try to really shield them as much as we can from things they shouldn't see online. We try to have the technology guards up. We try I mean, faith is a big part of our walk. So we use that as a way to guide them specifically. But we also talk to them about, listen, if you hear something at school, like, come talk to us. Just because you repeat it doesn't mean you're going to get in trouble. I want to just hear what you. So to me, that's an open line of communication about the things that they're experiencing or going through, and I know I'm constantly asking them, not just how was school, but what did you like about the day? What did you not like about the day? What was challenging? So I'm trying to always keep that bridge of communication open. And I know as they get older and they see more of the world, when they get to middle school and all that, and they get more access to technology, that they'll want to include my wife and I in some certain conversations, because we can't. What I've learned too, Jim, like, we can't shield them from everything, and I know we have friends that are trying to pick certain schools because, oh, this is a charter, or this is that, and to shield them from middle school and this and that. And I'm like, listen, like, and my wife and I'm like, listen, like, we are partners with them in what they're going through life with. I can't shield them from everything. I don't necessarily want to shield them from everything as they get older. I want to be able to walk with them through that and teach them about it. So, it's a fine line that we're working on now. Luckily, they're still in innocent mode, with stuff going on in the world. I really try not to have conversations about stuff that's going on politically or socially. I just try. They're young and they're impressionable. Certain stuff may slip by. And then I just kind of giggle. But certainly, I try to avoid stuff like that for now.
Yeah. Well, I think you bring up a good point where you can't necessarily shield them from everything, because at some point they're going to see it, they're going to hear it from a friend of a friend or whatever it's going to be. And to me, I find if you are overly protective and you try and shield them from literally everything, you almost wind up doing more harm than good, because now they're ill prepared to deal with it, right? Whereas if you give them a little bit of a glimpse into, hey, I'm not going to give you the full thing, right? I don't need you to sit down and digest 3 hours of political discourse. Nobody needs that. Not even an adult needs that. But if you can sit down and just at least understand, hey, this is what's going on. Here's the good, the bad, the ugly in 10-year-old terms, right? Just so you're aware if it comes up, this is the brief version of it. Cool. You're at least prepared. So that way, when it comes up, you can say, no, I'm not diving into that, because that's what I see from my mom and dad, right? My mom and dad don't argue with each other in the kitchen about who's right and who's wrong. They talk very mature, right? And at least they get a brief understanding of, hey, this is how they operate, because that's what they see. So now if we're talking that, this program, which I believe would be amazing for any school, I think is awesome. Where do we start to bridge the gap in the home with the parents, right? Whether mom and dad are both there, just mom, just dad, just the grandparents, whatever the situation is, like we started talking about earlier, if they're not around examples to follow, right? Followable excellence. How do they start to really hammer these things home if they're not getting that example in the house? And I guess a great follow-up to that, you can go one of two angles here, is how do we also deal with the parents that give them the example where they didn't have this program in school? How do we start to have the conversation with mom and dad so that they can start living the example, not just the kids?
I think in that sense, you over communicate with the parents. So, there's a misconception in parents, I think, now that the school, the teacher, the principal is supposed to do everything. Okay, educate my child, and help them through certain situations. And I'm of the mindset of no, you're a partner with your child's education experience. But it's tough when you have parents that are not reinforcing what the school's vision and values are. And I've been to places where the principals pulled me aside and said, we're doing everything we can to make this a positive, great place and pour into the strengths of these students who have been told for years that they're the problem student, they're the problem child, and they're labeled as that. And we try to break that down and put them in leadership roles. But the problem is that when they go home, they're getting no reinforcement, in the high school level, especially. So I think in that sense, I've hosted and I've pushed schools to host, like if I'm coming, give me a parent night, like invite your parents, let me talk to them about building better relationships with their son or daughter at home, and how the energy bus can apply to strengthening the family bond, right? And we've had great turnout in those events. But what I tell my schools is that the Energy Bus for Schools program, like we'll have resources that they can send home to the parents that are like conversation starters around each of those 5 Energy Bus rules, right? And I'll tell the staff, you can, the younger kids, you could print it and stick it in their folder to go home. You could put it on social media for the older parents. But then how do you know it's happening? You don't, right? And that's a struggle that I'm working on now. Like, how do we bring these parents more into the fold? And that's why I said over communicate. I tell my schools, you need to hit them from every angle. You need to put stuff on the marquee, social media, newsletter, email, text blast, And then there needs to be a time where your teachers, especially your superintendents or principals, are calling home randomly, especially when it's not just a bad call home, where it's a complimentary, here's what I noticed type thing. And there's systems schools can develop where it's a Google Drive where teachers or somebody can put on a student's name and something great they saw that student doing or something that happened with them, and then that gets loaded up, and the principal can randomly pick 5 names and call them 3 times a week. But if you did that throughout the school year, how many calls home you would get? So that, to me, it's over communication, because where there's a void in communication, negativity fills it. So if there's a void in communication between the school and the parent, right? The parent may think that, okay, that's just academics and that's it, right? They don't know all the great things that their son or daughter has experienced there on the micro level. Okay, macro, yeah, they'll see the grades, but the micro level, the intangibles, the leadership, the character, like that's the stuff that really will hit home. And then you hope that in doing so, the parent sees what a great job the school is doing and wants to have those conversations with their son or daughter on how they can help them move through that experience. So that's probably what I would say in that area. It's a challenging area for all schools, but when you over communicate, I think you try to cover your bases um, more than even not attempting at all.
Yeah. I think another thing I'm hearing you say in that is how important it is to go first and set the standard.
Yeah.
Like whether it's an administrator or whether it's just another parent or one of the kids, to be willing to just be the one who goes first and sets the example,
Yeah.
because you never know who's watching, right? Whether it's another kid, whether it's, hey, if the person listening to this right now can set the standard in their own home, that then their kid, when their kid goes to school, their kid is, a slightly watered down example of their standard. And that sets off a conversation for their friend or their friend group,
Right.
right? Because you decided to, live to a higher standard and be the example for your own family, right? That now trickles down to everybody else. I think it's a beautiful point, and it calls all of us to raise our own standards and kind of how we're showing up in our own lives because of how much importance it carries. And I think sometimes it's easy to forget that part, right? It's easy to forget how important it is for each of us because how many other people are really watching.
I think about a young child, right? Their pie of what they're exposed to, right? My own boys, right? I mean, my little girl, like this house and their school and their family is everything, right? They don't know what's going on socially, politically, world. They know there's a war, but they don't know everything. It's a small. So how we react to them, how we communicate with them, how their teachers and the environment their school is in, like that's like their entire world. And that's why, being a parent is one of the most difficult jobs in the whole world, because you can, how we are today when we're older, you can trace back to your upbringing, your childhood, and every therapist, somebody has ever gone to, and I'm an advocate for therapy if somebody's dealing with something, they always ask about childhood, right? There's usually something in our upbringing that has led to a personality deficit or a tendency or something, and none of us are going to be perfect. I get that. But, it just shows you the value of, you're right, of how much, um, not only your family culture, but your school culture, how kind of an impact that has on a child. And when they get older, right, our children in general are either going to seek out a school and a district like they had growing up, because if it was really, really good, okay, they're going to look when they get older, do I want to return to my hometown, right? Or am I going to, because of other things, go somewhere else? But I'm going to look for a community like I had growing up, right? And they're also going to become parents like they had growing up, right? They're going to take the good and they're going to learn from the bad or the challenging parts. So that should be a jolt of reality, to parents, to teachers, to administrators, that take this job seriously, because there's no more impressionable on this planet than our children. And there's a fight for them going on right now. There's a fight for our children going on right now, for their minds, for their attention. And schools, parents, teachers, right, especially parents, can go a long way in nudging, encouraging in certain directions, of course, but also just providing that well-rounded experience for them, from a conversation standpoint, from a love standpoint. It's it fuels me, right? When I'm out there talking to these teachers, it fuels me, because I know the message is, yes, is for the teachers if I do a big keynote speech, but I also want them to be the best version of themselves for their students and their own children at home too.
Yeah. I think I love how you talked about, how important is the childhood aspect. I do want to touch on the idea of you're going to mess it up. My perspective here, no matter what you do as a parent, you're not going to do it perfectly. So just giving yourself permission to not do it perfectly, because I think, sometimes, I know for me, when I went through my no half cake journey, my immediate reaction was to overcorrect. And I wanted to do everything perfectly. I wanted to be there for everything. And it almost made it worse. To now I'm overcorrecting. I'm causing a totally different type of childhood trauma, or whatever you want to call it, on my kids, because now I'm overcorrecting. So I think it's just getting to the mindset where, hey, if you do what is truly best for your kid, and that's all you can do, great, do that. And don't worry about, am I causing some level of childhood trauma? Because the answer is yes. No matter what you're
That's
doing,
a good point.
You're right. You're going to do it. And whether you call it trauma, whether you call it shaping their childhood, no matter what you want to call it, the actions that you're taking are impacting your kid. So don't worry about whether you did it perfectly or not, because you didn't. No matter what you did, you gave your kid a childhood. Focus on giving them the best possible one, and don't worry about it. Just live the standard. And I think it's freeing in a way to not have to worry about, am I doing it perfectly? Because obviously, look, if you love your kid, you want to do what's best for them. You don't want to give your kid a childhood that's going to scar them when they turn 25 and they're thinking about, oh, this is the negative effect of when I was 10. But you have to just focus on doing the right thing and not worrying about that part, because unfortunately we're all going to mess it up. We're not doing this out of we don't get a PhD in being a parent,
right?
Unfortunately, we do this trial and error,
right?
And I think it's understanding that part that really gives parents permission to fail forward and be there for their kids and give them that experience and not worry about, am I doing it perfectly? Because we can't.
And I think being vulnerable with our own children is something that's good for them too. I mean, learning to apologize to them if you need to, right? Because you messed up or you didn't handle the situation right, or I've had occurrences where I just got too mad, or I yelled, or I said something I shouldn't have said, and instead of just ignoring it or sweeping it under the rug, I sat one of them down and just said, "Hey, Dad, sorry about that. I didn't handle that right." And I think that's, I'm not going to do that every single time, of course, right? But I think you're right. Being vulnerable with them shows them that it is okay to mess up, and you can seek out that forgiveness or reconciliation, and it teaches your children about showing grace and empathy for that, and you hope that they will do the same too. So you're exactly right too. I mean, I certainly don't want to strive for perfection, because you'll fail every single time. But if you figure out, if you want to simplify everything, right, our children, they just need to know that we love them, right? And you need to find out how they best like to be loved too. Okay, and then you can double down on those areas, but also, you could spread it out too. But I mean, if your child loves, you spend time with them, look for special ways that you can do that, right? If your child is, we're 5 love languages guy, I'm huge on that. But those, in addition to other things, I think it's nice to diversify all of those. But they need to know that you are a strong presence in their world. You have their back. You're loyal to them. You love them. You're going to support them. You're not going to abandon them. Okay, that's the biggest thing. Is no child wants to ever feel like they're abandoned in any way. I think that's a big thing moving forward.
Yeah, and I think the biggest part of that too is them actually feeling it, right? Not just you doing it, but them actually feeling it and receiving it, because that's a very big thing that we miss, right? We say, "Oh, I love my kid." Of course, I love my kid, but do they always feel that is not always the same, right? And I think over communicating, like we talked about before, where you're making a conscious effort to remind them, "Hey, I love you because of X, Y, and Z," or you're encouraging them because of a thing they did, and you're really nurturing their nature, right? You see, hey, you are really good at this thing. Maybe they're not going to be, student of the month because they scored 100 on their math test, but they are amazing at art.
Right.
If you identify that and encourage that and they feel loved, appreciated, seen, and heard, that kid's going to have a totally different childhood because they feel that coming from their parent. And they don't feel this pressure to be, oh, well, I didn't get 100 on my test like Johnny did. I must be disappointing my parents. Because whether you think they think that or not, it's a real thought for a lot of kids, right? To have this pressure that they put on themselves. And hey, maybe you've never put it on them. Because there's been instances where I know very specifically my kid has come to me and said, like, you can feel sometimes when they're a little sheepish.
Yeah.
They feel like, hey, maybe I let dad down. I'm like, hey, what's the matter? Oh, I was nervous that you were going to be upset about this. In my head, I'm thinking, I have never given you an instance to think that I would actually care about that. But to them, right, if they think that's a possibility, it's real in their world. So I think a lot of this, too, has to come down to us taking responsibility to show up and listen and let them feel loved, appreciated, seen, and heard, because that matters.
It's very true. And it goes back to what I said, right? Where there's a void in communication, negativity fills it. So if we can be constantly communicating to our child, that encouraging them along the way, right? Encouraging them at the beginning, on the journey, and at the end, whatever the result was, whether they made the shot, missed the shot, whatever it is, that's going to go so much more, so much longer of a ways. And listen, I love kids that are ambitious and that have a drive to succeed and want to make that shot and want to, not fail. Like I think that's a great quality to have as a child, because that's going to help you later on be very, very driven as well. But we just need to give them the tools to deal with the failure and the challenges along the way. I think that's where parenting comes into play, is walking them through certain situations. And when they get a little bit older, it's like, all right, you're still with them, but you're maybe not as close because they want to figure out stuff. And I know that's parenting, right? You said it earlier. It's trial and error. I didn't take any parenting classes, you can read all the books and web articles, growing up, but your situation is going to be different than somebody else's. So it's nice to sort of take everything in stride and understand that your situation is going to be different. But when it boils down to it, our kids just want to feel loved and encouraged and supported along the way.
Yeah. I share this story often, but I feel like it's applicable here. I don't know if you've had this experience with your kids, but for me, I could very vividly think about being at the pool. My daughter says, "Hey, Dad, watch me do this jump." And she's going to jump off the diving board and she's going to do a little twist in the air. And it's really not that exciting in like the scope of things. To her, tremendously exciting. And what is the very first thing that kid does when they get up above the water? They look at you to see if you were actually looking. Mm-hmm. Right. And again, they just want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to be appreciated. And I feel like all of us, even as adults, are still those same kids who just want to be seen and heard and appreciated. And if we don't feel that, then we bleed onto our kids and we cause this generational trauma. Right. So that's why I think it's so important to be doing this at such a young age. And we're kind of cutting that off in the schools. Right. You're equipping these kids with the ability to feel that way and know how to process those emotions. I think that's hugely important.
I like to say we're helping to build, emotionally intelligent children, right? Who understand what it is they're feeling and going through and being able to express that. I think social emotional learning is a huge aspect of school. I think that's why elementary schools exist, not only to give them the foundation of their academics, but really it's about developing their character, early leadership traits, and working on their emotional stability at a young age, because that's going to help them so much more later on.
Yeah, I agree. So if you had to like boil this down to, obviously we've got the 5 parts of being on the bus. If there were one step someone could take today to have a slightly better day, or to be more successful, whatever success means to you or to them, what would that first step be?
I would say focus on the joy of the day. So it's easy to focus on the negative things that happen. It's easy to focus on the criticism you received, or the bad news, or something that negative that happened around you. But go to bed every night a success, right? Ask your child, hey, what's one success you had today? Or think to yourself, if you're listening as a parent or whomever, right? What's one thing that you can say was a success, a joy, a good thing that happened today? And double down on those areas. I think that's going to help you to be looking for other successes, not only in your world, but in others' worlds as well. You're going to want others to do that too. So I think when you look for the success, when you look for the good first, you will become less critical, less judgmental, and you're going to have a more optimistic mindset about your world, because there are great things happening all around us, but it's up to us to decide what are they? Are we in tune with them? And are we helping our children and others, their spouses, our friends, to look for that? Because it's easy for a group of people to get together and just complain about this or that or family, because everybody gets riled up. But what about the good things that are happening? And I think it takes somebody to step up and change the direction of conversation, not only with others, but with yourself too.
Yeah, I love that. Well, again, I want to thank you for doing the work that you do. I think it's tremendously important, and I can't even state it enough how much I appreciate it, because it does make a tremendous difference. So again, huge honor to you for doing what you do. How can people learn more about it if they want to do it in their own school, or like where can we engage further?
Well, thank you for saying that. And this is my life's work. It's what I feel like I'm on this earth to do, is to speak to educators and students. So that fuels me. And the Energy Bus for Schools program website is a great place to start. www.energybus4schools, FOR schools, plural.com is a great place. And then you can find me on all social media at Jim Van Allan, VANALLAN, and always putting out great content and things that'll help people have a better day and have value in their world. So the website, social media is best places to start.
Good. I appreciate that, and I'll be sure to share
Thank
that.
you.
And I'll actually be sharing this conversation with our own principal later this afternoon. So thank you for that.
Hey, I'm happy to send you a book too, and you can share it with your principal.
Yeah,
So I'm happy to do that as well.
let's do it. All right, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, before we go, can I pray for you real quick? Dear Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for this opportunity today to have this conversation. I want to thank you for this person listening to this podcast right now, that you gave them the breath in their lungs today, and the hope in their heart to show up here with a desire to help be more successful, and not just success in terms of money, but success in terms of impact, success in terms of leading the next generation to a more fulfilled life. And I just ask that you continue to bless us with the wisdom and the vision to see these things as they come to us, and continue us on a path that's going to put us in a position to help lift up the next generation and lift up all the people around us. I ask that you continue to give us opportunities where we can shine in who we truly are, in our authentic self, and continue to pour in the energy that you have given to us into our community, into the other people around us, because it does make a tremendous difference. And I ask all these things in your name. Amen. I love you.